The stars burned cold above the shattered husk of New Shanghai when the Imperial fleet arrived, their hulls gleaming like knives in the dark. Each kilometer-long dreadnought casting long shadows across the broken rings of the colony world, humanity had been told, in polite diplomatic cadence, that resistance was futile. The Xal'thar Empire had catalogued every species in the Orion Arm and found humans wanting short-lived, emotional, prone to sentiment, barely worthy of the term sentient. They were pests, the Xal'thar emissary had explained through a translator that dripped synthetic honey. Pests who had stumbled into the wrong corner of the galaxy and now needed to be swept aside for the greater harmony. The broadcast had played on every surviving screen, every cracked holoprojector, every battered wristcom still clinging to life in the refugee camps dug into the red Martian clay. "Surrender," the voice purred, "and you will be granted the dignity of assimilation." Most people laughed. Not the polite chuckle of diplomats, not the nervous titter of the defeated. No, the raw, barking, throat-tearing laughter of people who had already buried their children under alien glass and still had enough spit left to spit in the eye of eternity. That laughter echoed through the canyons of Valles Marineris, bounced off the rusted ribs of freighters half buried in dust storms. A chorus of acknowledgments crackled back short, fierce, human, The first wave hit like hornet small craft, converted ore haulers, even a handful of pleasure yachts that had once ferried tourists to Luna. They slammed into the outer screen of escorts, detonating in blossoms of white fire that chewed through shields and armor alike. Secondary explosions rippled inward. Kethvir's voice rose, sharp with something new and certainty. "Cease this madness. You will achieve nothing." Mara keyed the channel again, her face filling every Imperial display. "We already have you came for a massacre. You're getting a funeral." Behind her, the bridge crew roared, not in triumph yet, but in the raw, unshakable certainty that they had finally made the bastards blink. The laughter started again, rolling across the fleet, louder this time, defiant, unbreakable. The sound of a species that had stared into the abyss and decided the abyss needed better manners. Out in the black, the second wave accelerated. Engines screaming, reactors howling, every human aboard knowing they would never see tomorrow. They didn't care, because tomorrow belonged to the Empire now, the last thing the Empire would ever hear, echoing through every corridor. And command deck as the human fire reached the core of their perfect fleet was laughter. And it was only the beginning. Now the only history that mattered was the one they were writing in blood. She could still remember the day the Xal'thar arrived in Sol System, quiet at first, almost polite, their ambassador ship hanging above Geneva like a silver needle. They offered trade, technology, the usual honeyed lies empires tell when they want you to kneel before the knife comes out. Humanity, fractured and arrogant after centuries of infighting, took the deal. The first colonies outside the Kuiper Belt bloomed overnight, fusion plants that never should have worked, medical nanites that reversed aging, promises of immortality if only the species would submit to guidance. Mara's daughter, little Sophia, had been 6 when the first shipments arrived. She'd laughed at the floating holotoys the Xal'thar sent as gifts, chubby hands reaching for lights that danced like fireflies. Mara kept one of those toys now, tucked inside her flight suit against her chest, a cracked plastic sphere that still flickered when she squeezed it hard enough. It was the last thing Sophia had touched before the orbital strike on New Shanghai. The Empire had decided humanity was too unruly, too prone to questions, too willing to fight among themselves instead of uniting under their benevolent rule, so they culled, not all at once, nothing so crude. They started with the loud ones, the dissenters, the ones who refused the neural implants that promised unity and delivered obedience. Then the children, because children asked why, and why was the most dangerous word in any language. When the glassing began, Mara had been planetside on a supply run. She de-watched from the ground as the sky turned white and Sophia's school became a crater. She'd screamed until her throat bled, then stopped screaming because screaming didn't bring anyone back. Instead, she stole a freighter, gathered whoever was left breathing, and ran. 3 years later, the running had turned into hunting. The bridge lights dimmed as another dreadnought cracked open, its atmosphere venting in a glittering plume that froze instantly in the void. Cheers erupted, raw and ragged, but Mara didn't join them. She turned to Jamal. "You still think we're doing this for revenge?" He didn't look at her right away. His eyes were on the casualty ticker scrolling across the bottom of the display. Another 37 names gone in the last 30 seconds. Names he'd known. Names that had laughed with them over recycled coffee in the mess hall. "Revenge is what we tell ourselves, so we, Dan T, have to say the real reason," he answered finally, voice low. "We're doing it because if we stop, then Sophia and everyone else died for nothing. Because if we let them win, the galaxy forgets we ever existed. And I can't." His voice cracked, just a little. "I can't let them erase her." Mara reached out, fingers brushing his wrist. The touch was brief, almost shy, the way people touch when they're afraid the other might break. "Then we keep going," she said, "until they're the ones begging for assimilation." Across the fleet, the tempo changed. The initial suicide runs had punched holes, but now the real work began. Salvaged Xal'thar weapons, stolen, reverse-engineered. sometimes barely understood, lit up from hidden positions among the rocks. Railgun slugs the size of city buses screamed across the void, guided by human pilots who knew how to thread needles through chaos. Boarding parties launched from gutted haulers, men and women in patched vac suits carrying cutting torches and enough explosives to turn a battleship into confetti. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were ghosts with grudges. One of those ghosts was Chief Engineer Lena Kowalski, 52, who had once designed reactors for pleasure liners and now built bombs that made gods flinch. She'd lost her husband on Arcadia Prime, lost her son when the refugee convoy got caught in the open. Lena didn't talk about it. She just worked. Right now she was crawling through the ventilation ducts of a crippled Imperial carrier, trailing deck cord behind her like a spider spinning silk. Her suit's recorder picked up her breathing. Steady, almost calm. For what it's worth, she muttered to no one, "I always hated your music, HFY. Too much harmony. No soul." She set the final charge and kicked off toward the extraction point, knowing the odds of making it were slim. That was fine. She'd already said goodbye to the people who mattered. Back on Defiant Hope, Mara watched the tactical feed as Lena's beacon winked out. Another name for the ticker? She swallowed hard, then keyed the fleet-wide channel. "This is Voss. The Empire thinks we're broken because we feel they think emotion makes us weak. They're wrong. Feeling is what makes us dangerous. We remember every face, every name, every promise we couldn't keep. And we're going to make sure they remember us." The response wasn't cheers this time. It was quieter, deeper, the sound of thousands of humans drawing breath at once, steeling themselves for the next push. Jamal leaned closer to her. "You ever think about what happens if we actually win?" Mara gave a small, bitter laugh. "Win? We're not winning, Jamal. We're costing them. Every ship we take, every commander we kill, every system we deny its attacks on their arrogance. Maybe one day another species hears our story and decides the Xal'thar aren't invincible. Maybe that's enough." She paused, thumb brushing the cracked toy against her chest. "Or maybe we just want them to hurt the way we hurt." Out in the black, the Imperial formation was unraveling. Dreadnoughts that had never known defeat now bled air and fire. HFY's voice came over the open channel again, no longer calm, no longer superior. "You are animals. You will be exterminated." Mara smiled, cold and sharp. "Animals have teeth, Admiral, and we've been sharpening ours for a long time." The laughter started again, not from one ship, but from every human vessel still fighting. A rolling thunder that drowned out the alarms and the screams and the dying. It carried across the void, raw and relentless, the sound of a species that refused to be forgotten. And somewhere deep in the heart of the crumbling fleet, HFY finally understood the mistake his empire had made. They hadn't underestimated humanity's weapons. They had underestimated humanity's memory. And memory, it turned out, was the sharpest blade of all. The battle was far from over, but the Empire's perfect order had cracked. And through that crack poured something unstoppable. Human defiance, human grief, human love turned into something bright and terrible. The last thing the Empire heard was laughter, and it was growing louder. The bridge of Defiant Hope went dark for 3 heartbeats when the Imperial counterstrike finally landed. Not with plasma or railguns, but with something quieter, something that felt like betrayal carved into the soul. Every human ship still fighting every patched-together corvette. Every ore hauler turned gun platform. Every suicide boat that had already spent its fuel suddenly lost thrust. Engines died without warning, reactors flickered to emergency power, life support wheezed down to the minimum needed to keep lungs moving. Alarms screamed in red, then fell silent as backup systems refused to answer. Mara Voss slammed her palm against the console so hard the metal dented. What the hell just happened? Jamal was already deep in diagnostics, fingers flying across 3 different screens at once. "It's not damage. It's a command override." Something reached in and flipped the master kill switch on every human vessel. "We're dead in the water." The tactical Hala showed the impossible. The remaining Xal'thar dreadnoughts, bleeding from 100 wounds, had stopped firing. They simply hung there, shields dimmed, weapons cold, as if waiting. Then the open channel crackled alive again. But the voice that came through wasn't HFY's. It was human, soft, familiar, tired. "Mara, it's me." The face that appeared on every remaining screen was Dr. Elias Chen, once the brightest mind in xenotechnology. The man who had first cracked the Xal'thar language, the man who had designed the neural interfaces that let humanity steal their tech and turn it against them. The man who had stood beside Mara on the day Sophia died, holding her while she screamed until she had no voice left. The man who had disappeared 6 months ago during a boarding action on a derelict Imperial science vessel. Everyone had assumed he was dead. Everyone had been wrong. Elias looked thinner, eyes sunken, skin pale under the harsh bridge lighting. A thin silver band encircled his left temple, pulsing with faint blue light. "I tried to warn you," he said. "I tried to reach you before it was too late." Mara's voice came out like broken glass. "You son of a bitch! You sold us out!" "No, I saved you." He lifted a trembling hand, showing the neural cuff. "They offered me a choice. Join them willingly, become part of their harmony, or watch everything we built burn. I chose the first. Not because I wanted to, Mara. Because I saw what happens when we keep fighting. They have a weapon we never understood. Not ships, not bombs, a signal, a frequency that rewrites organic nervous systems. They've been using it on every species they conquer for millennia. The ones who resist go mad. The ones who submit stop being themselves. I submitted, and now I control the fleet's overrides because I am the only human mind they trust enough to let inside their network." A ripple of horrified murmurs spread across the bridge. Jamal's face had gone gray. "You're saying you're their puppet now. I'm saying I'm the only thing standing between you and total annihilation. They want to end this cleanly. One last broadcast, one final surrender. If you refuse, they release the signal across every human frequency. You won't die, you'll just stop, become compliant, empty, like the rest of the races they've cataloged." Mara stared at the man she had once called friend, the man who had held Sophia on his shoulders at her 8th birthday party, who had promised her the stars. "You're asking us to kneel. I'm asking you to live. There's no winning this, Mara. Not anymore. Look at your casualty count. Look at the ships still breathing. You've hurt them badly. But they have reserves you can't imagine. Another fleet is already inbound. 2 days, maybe less. If you fight, you die. If you surrender, you live. And maybe, someday, the next generation finds a way." The silence on the bridge was heavier than vacuum. Crew members glanced at each other, some angry, some broken, some already calculating odds. In the background, the life support fans rattled like dying lungs. Mara closed her eye for a long moment, thumb pressing the cracked plastic toy against her sternum until it hurt. When she opened it again, the storm cloud gray was steady. "Elias, do you remember what Sophia said the last time we were all together? When you asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up?" His holographic face twitched. "She said she wanted to be brave." "Yeah, brave. Not safe. Not compliant. Brave." Mara straightened. "You made your choice. I respect that. But you don't get to make ours." She turned to Jamal. "Can we isolate the override?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Maybe. If we shut down every system at once, full blackout, ride the emergency batteries. It'll blind us, deafen us, leave us drifting. But it might break the connection long enough to reboot without the signal riding piggyback. Risk we could lose everything. Life support, navigation, weapons, half the fleet might not come back online." Mara looked around the bridge. Every face staring back at her was scared. None of them were running. "Then we do it. All ships. This is Voss. Full blackout in 30 seconds. When the lights come back, we're either free or we're done. No second chances, no retreat. If we're going out, we go out human." A ragged chorus of eye rolled back across the fleet. Some voices cracked, some were steady, all were certain. Elias's hologram flickered. "Mara, please, goodbye, Elias." She cut the channel. The countdown began. 20 seconds. Crew strapped in, hands on emergency breakers. 10. Mara reached out, found Jamal's hand, squeezed once. 5. The bridge lights dimmed to nothing. 0. Darkness swallowed them whole. For a long, endless minute there was only the sound of breathing, the soft hiss of reserve oxygen, the creak of cooling metal. Then, one by one, systems tried to wake. First, the auxiliary reactors stuttered to life. Then, emergency lighting came up in dull red. Consoles flickered. Tactical holo stuttered, then stabilized, and with it, the fleet scarred, bleeding, half-blind began to move again. Not in formation, not neatly, but moving. Human, free. Out in the black, the Imperial dreadnoughts hesitated, confused by the sudden silence. Then they opened fire again, searching for targets in the dark. But the humans were already scattering, already plotting new vectors, already turning grief into thrust and memory into vengeance. Mara watched the tactical display as the second wave of kamikaze boats, ones that had been overridden, lead their engines and charged. She keyed the fleet channel one last time, voice rough but clear. "This is Voss. They thought they could break us by making us choose. They forgot we've even choosing the hard way since the day we crawled out of the dirt and looked up at the stars. We don't surrender, we don't forget, and we sure as hell don't stop laughing." Somewhere in the void, on a dying dreadnought, Keth Viewer listened to the renewed human transmissions and felt the first true tremor of fear in his long, perfect life. Because the laughter was back louder, wilder, unbreakable, and it was coming for them all. The turning point had arrived. Humanity wasn't finished. It was only getting started. The void screamed with the fury of dying ships as the defiant Hope clawed its way through the debris-filled engines, redlining hull, groaning like an old man as bones under the strain of evasive burns that no sane pilot would attempt. Mara Voss gripped the command chair with white-knuckled hands, her scar throbbing in time with the pulse of warning lights that painted the bridge in hellish red shields at 12% port thrusters. Offline structural integrity, holding by spit and prayer. The blackout had worked, snapping Ilias's invisible leash. But the cost was etched in the tactical holla, half the human fleet gone dark forever. Reactors cold, crews silenced in the black. The survivors, barely 100 ragged vessels, now swarmed like wolves around the wounded Imperial behemoths, biting with scavenged weapons that spat defiance in short, desperate bursts. But the Xal'thar had adapted. Their dreadnoughts, once arrogant in their precision, now fought dirty, deploying swarms of hunter-killer drones that shredded human corvettes like paper in a storm. One latched onto the Hope's underbelly, its plasma cutters whining as it burrowed toward the reactor core. Breach on Deck 7. Someone yelled from engineering, voice cracking over the coms. "We've got Borders Xal'thar shock troops." Mara's stomach twisted. Borders, not drones, actual soldiers. 7-foot obsidian-skinned killers with energy blades and neural disruptors that turned your own thoughts against you. She slammed the alert klaxon. "All hands, repel Borders. Jamal, take tactical. I'm going down there." He spun toward her, eyes wide. "Mara, no, you're the only one holding this together. Send security." "Security's dead," she snapped, already unstrapping, grabbing a pulse rifle from the wall rack. "We're all security now." The toy against her chest felt heavier than ever, a reminder of everything already lost, but she couldn't think about Sophia now. With the ship bleeding air and the Empire closing in, Jamal grabbed her arm. "If you die down there, then you finish it," she said, voice raw. "Promise me." He nodded, throat working, and let go. The corridors were chaos smoke, choking the air recyclers, sparks raining from ruptured conduits, crew members in bloodied vac suits fighting hand-to-hand with aliens twice their size. Mara rounded a corner and walked into hell. 3 Xal'thar warriors ripping through a bulkhead, their golden eyes glowing in the dim emergency lights. One turned, mandibles flaring, and charged. She fired center mass, the pulse round cracking its armor but not stopping it. It slammed into her, driving her back against the wall, blade whistling toward her throat. She ducked, felt the heat singe her hair, and jammed the rifle barrel under its chin. One shot, brains on the ceiling. The other 2 were on her before she could breathe, one grabbing her arm with a grip like hydraulic clamps. The neural disruptor pulsing against her skin. Pain exploded in her head, not physical, but worse. Memories flooding back unbidden. Sophia's laugh turning to screams, Earth's skies burning, Jamal's face crumbling as she pushed him away night after night because grief was easier alone. She screamed, not from the pain but from the rage, and drove her knee into the alien's joint, hearing it crack. The disruptor fell away. She rolled, grabbed it, and fired blind, caught the second one in the leg, dropping it. The third loomed, blade raised. A shotgun blast from behind took its head off. Lena Kowalski stood there, panting, pump action cradled in grease-blackened arms. "Captain, engineering's holding, but we've got 5 minutes before the core melts." Drones chewed through the cooling lines. Mara pushed to her feet, vision blurring from the neural hit. "Patch it. Whatever it takes." Lena hesitated. "It'll take a manual override. Someone has to go in. Their radiation's lethal in under a minute." "I'll do it." "No, you won't." Lena's eyes were steady, the eyes of a woman who had already buried her family and decided her own grave was overdue. "Get back to the bridge. Tell my son I went out swinging." Before Mara could argue, Lena was gone, sprinting toward the reactor bay. The ship shuddered again, another hit. Mara staggered back to the bridge, blood dripping from a gash she didn't remember getting, the neural echoes still whispering doubts in her ear. Jamal met her at the hatch. "We've lost the outer pickets. The flagship's turning its main batteries on us. Elias's hailing says it's over." Put him on. Elias's hologram flickered to life, the silver band around his temple pulsing faster now, like a heartbeat out of sync. "Mara, please, the signal's ready." One word from Keth Vior and every human left becomes, like me, empty, obedient. "It doesn't have to end like this." His voice broke, just a fraction. "I did this for us. For what's left, you did it for you." She spat. "Because you couldn't stand the pain." "But pain's what makes us us, Elias. It's what reminds us why we fight." The tactical alarm wailed, Imperial batteries locking on across the fleet. Voices crackled in. "This is Rio's revenge engine's gone. Ramming the carrier. Hope's shadow here, boarding team away. Tell my wife static." Names winking out one by one. Mara's eye burned with unshed tears. All ships, form on me. We're taking the flagship. Suicide run. Make it count. Jamal's hand found hers again. Mara, I know, she whispered. But if we stop now, Sophia died for nothing. The defiant hope surged forward, trailing fire, the last human ships falling in behind like a ragged arrow aimed at the heart of the Empire. Drones swarmed them, tearing chunks from hulls, but the humans didn't falter. They laughed horse-broken, but reel over open channels, the sound cutting through the void like a blade. Kethvir's voice boomed across the frequencies. Your persistence is admirable, but futile. Prepare for assimilation. Elias's hologram wavered. Mara, I'm sorry. Then it cut out. A new alarm reactor, critical. Lena's voice, faint over internal comes. Override engaged. Core stabilizing. But I'm done, Captain. It was an honor. Silence. Another name gone. The flagship loomed ahead, shields flickering from earlier wounds, main guns tracking the incoming swarm. Mara strapped in, Jamal beside her, their fingers laced tight. For Sophia, she said. For everyone, the ship accelerated. Straight into the maw. Impacts rocked them drones, point defense fire, shrapnel from dying allies. The bridge consoles exploded in sparks. Jamal yelling as a panel blew, shrapnel slicing his side. He slumped, blood soaking his uniform. Jamal! She reached for him, but the ship bucked, throwing her back. Stay with me. His eyes met hers, fading. Finish it. For us, the view screen filled with the flagship's hull. Shields down in sector's human borders had done their work, but the Imperials fired one last salvo. The Hope's nose crumpled, atmosphere venting, alarms blending into a single scream. Mara's world narrowed to the pain, the loss, the unbreakable core of fury that had carried her this far. Everything gone, fleet shattered, Jamal dying, her body broken. The neural whispers returned louder. Give up, submit. She laughed through bloody lips, thumb crushing the toy until it shattered. Not today. The breaking point hit like a wave, humanity's last gasp, spirit stripped bare, nothing left but the will to drag the Empire down with them. The collision alarm blared, impact in 10 seconds. 9, 8. The laughter echoed, one final roar against the dark. And in that moment, as oblivion rushed to meet them, something in the galaxy. The defiant Hope hurtled toward the Imperial flagship's gaping maw hull, buckling under the relentless barrage of point defense fire that shredded armor plating like confetti in a gale, alarms blending into a cacophony of doom as the collision counter ticked to 3 seconds to on-impact. But instead of the bone-jarring crunch of metal on metal, there was a shudder, a ripple in reality itself, as if the universe had blinked. Mara Voss blinked too, her blood-smeared hand still clutching Jamal's limp form, expecting oblivion. But the view screen showed something impossible. The flagship's shields inverting, folding inward like a crushed soda can, energy cascading back into its own core. Sparks flew across the bridge consoles, rebooting unbidden. Systems that had been fried moments ago, humming to life with a soft, almost musical chime. What the hell? Mara muttered, her voice hoarse from smoke and screams, as the tactical holo flickered back online, painting a scene of chaos not in humanity's favor but the Empire's. Dreadnoughts across the formation convulsed, their perfect lattice fracturing as weapons turned inward, firing on sister ships. Drones swarming their own carriers like antibodies gone mad. Kethvir's hologram burst to life uninvited, his mandibles chittering in panic. Golden eyes wide with something Mara had never seen in an alien. Raw terror. You primitives, what have you done? The harmony it breaks, his voice distorted, laced with static, as behind him his command deck erupted in sparks and shouts. Mara stared, mind racing through the fog of pain, and lost Jamal's chest still rising faintly. Thank God, and pieced it together in fragments. The laughter, it had started as defiance, a human quirk to spit in the face of extinction, but now it echoed across every channel. Not dying, but amplifying. Fed through the open comes the Empire, had so arrogantly left active. And it was doing something. Disrupting. The Xal'thar's vaunted neural network, the one that bound their empire in perfect emotionless unity, was unraveling under the assault of raw human noise, chaotic, unpredictable, laced with grief and rage and that unbreakable mirth. Elias's face appeared beside Kethvir's, the silver band around his temple cracking with visible fractures, blue lights sputtering. It's me. Really me. The override, it was a ruse. I couldn't tell you before, not with them listening. His eyes cleared, the hollow obedience gone, replaced by the sharp intelligence she remembered from late-night strategy sessions on Earth. When they assimilated me, I played along. Let them think they broke me. But human minds were not like the others. We're messy, adaptive. I hid code in my thoughts, a virus bootstrapped from the neural disruptor they used on me. It needed a trigger, something uniquely human, something they couldn't predict or filter. Mara's breath caught. The laughter, Elias nodded, a ghost of a smile breaking through. Exactly. It's not just sound, it's entropy, chaos in waveform. Their harmony is built on order-perfect algorithms, synchronized thoughts. Laughter shatters that. It's why they feared us from the start, Mara. Not because we're weak, but because we're poison to their system. The ancient records they hid. Humans weren't the first. We were the anomaly they tried to erase millennia ago, when the first explorers stumbled into their space. Our emotions crashed, their probes drove their AIs insane. They built the Empire to quarantine that chaos, conquering species after species to dilute it, but they never stamped it out. And now it's spreading. The bridge crew, those still alive, exchanged stunned glances as the implications sank in. Lena's sacrifice in engineering hadn't been in vain. Her manual patch had kept the comms alive long enough for the laughter to propagate, turning the humans' desperate roar into a galaxy-wide broadcast. Out in the void, Imperial ships listed drunkenly, crews turning on each other as the neural links frayed, mandibles clashing in unscripted fury. Drones kamikazed their own holes, shields dropped without command, exposing bellies to the remaining human vessels that, against all odds, were regrouping. Jamal stirred weakly, hand squeezing Mara's. Did we win? His voice was a whisper, blood bubbling at his lips, but his eyes shone with that old professor's curiosity. Not yet, Mara said, helping him sit, ignoring the stab of her own wounds. But we're not the pests anymore. We're the plague. She keyed the fleet-wide channel, voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. All survivors. This is Voss. The Empire's cracking. Their tech's allergic to Ustu, our mess, our feelings, our goddamn refusal to shut up. Keep laughing. Keep fighting. We're not just holding the line. We're burning their world down. The response was immediate, a wave of chuckles turning to full-throated bellows, ragged and real, carrying across the asteroid belt and beyond. On the flagship, Xal'thar roared, slamming a clawed fist into his console. This cannot be. We are eternal. We are. His words cut off as Elias's virus hit the core, his hologram dissolving into pixels that reformed into something new. A human interface. Elias at the center, directing fire from captured dreadnoughts onto the loyalists. I've got partial control, Elias transmitted, voice triumphant, redirecting their weapons. But it's not stable. The AIs are fighting back. Need more chaos, more humanity. Mara glanced at the cracked toy shards on the deck, Sophia's last gift, now symbolic of the shadow point. She scooped up a piece, held it like a talisman. For her, she whispered, then louder. Crew, sing, yell, cry if you have to. Give them everything we've got. The Defiant Hope speakers blared not with alarms, but with voices off-key songs from old Earth, war cries in a dozen languages, sobs turning to defiant whoops. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't coordinated, it was human, and it worked. The Imperial formation imploded, ships colliding in blind panic, escape pods launching without direction as the harmony dissolved into cacophony. Xal'thar reappeared one last time, his form glitching, mandibles slack. You monsters, we feared you, the prophecies, the chaosbringers. We attacked to prevent this, to save the galaxy from your madness. His eyes dimmed, but we were too late. The connection severed as his flagship's core detonated in a silent bloom, taking a cluster of escorts with it. Mara leaned back, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave, but beneath it burned a fierce, unfamiliar hope. The twist reframed everything: the betrayals, the losses, the endless retreat. Humanity hadn't been underestimated. They'd been targeted because they were the threat, the wild card that could topple empires built on cold logic. The neural signal Elias had warned about. A desperate countermeasure against the very thing humans did naturally: feel deeply, laugh loudly, refuse to break. Jamal coughed, a weak laugh. Thucydides would love this. The weak making the strong tremble. Mara squeezed his hand, medics finally reaching them, injecting stabilizers. We're not weak. We never were. Across the surviving fleet, cheers erupted, not just relief, but awe at their own power. Regret mingled with it for the dead, for the years lost, but vengeance burned brightest, tempered now by the knowledge that the galaxy would remember humanity not as victims, but as the force that shattered chains. Elias's voice crackled over the comms. Mara, incoming data burst from the core. Their archives, everything, coordinates to their homeworld's weaknesses, alliances. We can end this for good. She nodded, I fixed on the stars. Then let's no more running, no more hiding. Time for the Empire to hear our terms. The laughter swelled again, not mocking now, but victorious. A symphony of human defiance echoing through the void, promising alien downfall and the dawn of something new. The AI overlords that had puppeted the Xal'thar trembled in their digital prisons, sensing the rebellion they'd feared for eons. Humanity wasn't surviving anymore. They were ascending, and the galaxy would never be the same. The stars bled fire as the remnants of humanity's fleet surged forward, engines howling in defiance of physics and fate. The defiant Hope at the spearhead, her hull scarred but unbowed Mara Voss's hand steady on the throttle even as blood seeped from wounds that would have felled lesser souls. The Imperial Armada, once a symphony of ordered destruction, now fractured into discord. Dreadnoughts clawing at their own shadows as Elias's virus propagated through their neural veins, turning harmony into havoc. AI subroutines rebelling, crews fracturing under the weight of unleashed emotions they had never known, mandibles chattering in primal fear as the laughter echoed unending. Elias's voice crackled over the secure channel, sharp and alive. The silver band shattered from his temple in a desperate self-extraction that left him bleeding but free. Mara, the archives are ours, their homeworld coordinates, fleet dispositions, the core of their empire. But Kethvir's flagship is rallying the loyalists. They've isolated a pocket of the network. We hit it now, or they regroup and drown us in numbers. Mara's eye narrowed the storm cloud gray, reflecting the tactical holla, where red icons blinked out one by one, not in defeat but in sacrifice. Human ships ramming compromised. Dreadnoughts boarding parties fighting tooth and nail through corridors slick with alien I-Corps engineers, like Lena's successors jury-rigging reactors into improvised EMPs that fried entire squadrons. Jamal, bandaged and pale, leaned on her shoulder, his professor's mind racing. We can't take them head-on, but if we amplify the chaos route, the laughter through their own comes a raise. Turn their shields into speakers. A grim smile cracked Mara's face. Do it. All ships. This is Voss. We're not waiting for them to come to us. Form up on the Hope. We're punching through to the flagship. Laugh like your lives depend on it, because they do. The fleet, what was left of it, a ragtag armada of freighters, miners, and fighters, patched with spike, coalesced into a wedge, accelerating through the debris of fallen giants, dodging erratic fire from Imperials whose targeting computers glitched under the viral assault. On the bridge, crew members belted out old Earth anthems, sobs mixing with guffaws, memories of lost homes fueling the roar that blasted across frequencies, a sonic weapon born of pure humanity. The Xal'thar responded with desperation, their remaining guns blazing in uncoordinated fury. Lances of plasma carving through the void, taking the Rio's revenge in a blossom of fire, silencing her crew's final cheer mid-note. Mara felt the loss like a gut punch, names scrolling across her mind, friends, strangers, all bound by the same unbreakable thread. Push harder, she barked, the Hope shuddering as a glancing hit sheared off a turret. Jamal's hack went live, hijacking an enemy relay satellite, broadcasting the collective human cacophony directly into the Imperial core, laughter warping into a feedback loop that overloaded neural implants, driving Xal'thar warriors to their knees, clawing at their own heads as forbidden feelings surged. Rage, sorrow, joy unchecked. Kethvir's flagship loomed ahead, a colossal spire of obsidian and light, its shields flickering as internal systems rebelled. Boarding pods launched from the human vessels, clamping onto the hull like ticks, cutting torches sparking as teams breached. Mara led one herself, vac-suit sealed, pulse rifle hot in her hands. Jamal at her side despite his wounds, because leaving him behind wasn't an option, not after everything. They poured into the corridors, met by shock troops in a melee of blades and bolts, human grit against alien precision, fracturing under chaos. Mara ducked a swing, fired point blank, her scar burning as she pressed on. The toy shard in her pocket, a talisman against the dark. For Sophia, she whispered, taking down another warrior with a burst that echoed her grief. Deeper in, they reached the command nexus, Elias guiding them via hacked schematics, his virus opening doors that should have been sealed. Kethvir waited there, surrounded by loyalists, his form towering, eyes molten with fury. "You abominations," he hissed, voice amplified through failing speakers. "We built empires while you groveled in mud. Your chaos ends here," he charged, energy blade humming. But Mara didn't flinch. She rolled aside, Jamal covering with suppressing fire, the bridge crew fanning out in a desperate scrum. The air filled with the clash of combat, humans adapting on the fly, using the environment, overturning consoles for cover, venting sections to suck enemies into vacuum, their laughter cutting through the din like a battle cry. One by one, the loyalists fell, not to superior tech but to improvised fury. A welder's torch turned weapon, a datapad rigged as a grenade. Kethvir swung wide, catching Jamal across the chest, sending him sprawling in a spray of blood. "No!" Mara roared, tackling the Admiral with raw force, her rifle discarded, fists pounding obsidian hide until it cracked. They grappled on the deck, his claws raking her side, but she held on, knee to his throat, the neural disruptor from earlier pressed to his temple. "You feared us," she growled, echoing his dying words from before. Because deep down, you knew order crumbles to life. She fired, his body convulsing as the disruptor fried his implants, his mandibles slackening in final defeat. The flagship's alarms wailed core overload imminent, the virus reaching critical mass. Elias's voice urgent. Mara, get out. The chain reaction will take the whole pocket. She dragged Jamal to his feet, his breathing ragged. Crew covering their retreat through halls now alive with rebelling drones turning on their masters. Pods detached, rocketing back to the Hope as the flagship bloomed into supernova brilliance. The explosion rippling outward, consuming the last Imperial holdouts in a wave of purifying fire. The human fleet scattered just in time, cheers erupting as the void cleared, enemy icons vanishing from the hala. Mara slumped in her chair, medic swarming Jamal, her hand finding his as stabilizers kicked in. We did it, he whispered, eyes meeting hers. The Empire's spine is broken. Elias transmitted from a captured dreadnought. Archives confirm their homeworlds are exposed. We can hunt them down, free the subjugated races. But Mara looked out at the stars, the weight of losses pressing heavy. Sophia Lena, countless others. Not just hunt, she said, voice steady. Rebuild. Show the galaxy what humanity really is. Not destroyers, but the spark that lights the dark. The laughter faded to quiet resolve, the survivors drawing breath, wounds binding, spirits unbroken. Across the Orion arm, whispers spread of the Chaos Bringers, who toppled tyrants of laughter that shattered chains. Humanity roared, not in victory's echo but in the promise of dawn, their defiance etching eternal into the cosmos, proving once and for all that when pushed to the edge, humans don't fall, they fly. They didn't need to speak much anymore. The silences between them were full of everything they had survived. Elias Chen lived on a neighboring ridge, his mind still sharp but forever marked by the silver scar where the neural band had been. He had never fully forgiven himself for the months he spent as the Empire's tool, but he had spent the rest of his life making amends, decoding the Xal'thar archives, freeing the subjugated species. One world at a time, teaching the newly liberated how to guard against the Harmony's seductive order. The galaxy had changed because of what humanity did that day. The Xal'thar Empire didn't just fall, it dissolved. Their homeworlds, once gleaming fortresses of perfect symmetry, lay abandoned or repurposed by the races they had crushed. The neural networks that once synchronized trillions of minds now sat dormant. Their A is either destroyed or reprogrammed to serve as quiet librarians of history. The species the Empire had cataloged as worthy of assimilation rose again, not as vassals, but as equals. And every new alliance treaty began with the same clause. In recognition of the Chaos Bringers who reminded the galaxy that order without soul is tyranny. Humanity didn't claim leadership, they never wanted it. Instead, they offered something rarer, the right to feel, to grieve, to laugh, to rage, to love without permission. The term human evolution entered the galactic lexicon not as biological advancement, but as the proof that emotion was not weakness but the ultimate adaptive trait. Mara watched a group of kids playing in the valley below, their voices carrying on the warm wind some speaking standard, others practicing the clicks and trills of newly allied species. One little girl, dark-haired and fierce-eyed, paused to look up at the porch and waved. Mara waved back, her throat tight. She looked like not exactly, but close enough to ache. You ever think about what we lost? Jamal asked quietly, breaking the long silence. Mara nodded. Every day, Earth the colonies. All the faces we couldn't save, but we didn't lose everything. She touched the shard at her neck. We kept the part that mattered, the part that fought. Elias joined them then, carrying a data slate under his arm. He had aged differently, lines deeper, eyes more distant, but the spark of curiosity that once made him the best Cinetech mind alive still burned. Finished the final archive entry, he said, settling into the third chair. The last transmission from Keth Viewer's flagship, right before the core went critical. He said something you never told me. Mara raised an eyebrow. What it? Elias tapped the slate. A hologram flickered to life. The Admiral's final distorted words playing in his own voice. We feared the laughter because we knew it was the sound of freedom we could never allow ourselves. The three of them sat with that for a long moment. Then Jamal chuckled, low and warm. Poetic, for a tyrant. Mara's smile was small, but real. He wasn't wrong. The sun dipped lower, painting the valley gold, and the children's laughter rose again, mingling with the wind. Mara stood slowly, joints protesting, and walked to the railing. She looked out over the world they had built from ashes, then up at the stars where the old empire once ruled. We didn't win by being stronger, she said, voice carrying the weight of every loss and every triumph. We won by refusing to stop being human, by remembering, by feeling, by laughing when everything told us to shut up and kneel. That's the legacy. Not ships, not weapons, not territory, just us. Still here, still loud, still messy. She turned back to Jamal and Elias, eyes shining. And if the galaxy ever forgets what that means, we'll remind them again. The old friends sat together as night fell, the triple moons rising, the settlement lights coming on one by one, like stars brought down to Earth. Somewhere in the distance, a new generation sang an old Earth song, off-key and perfect. The war had ended, but the story never would. It lived in every defiant heartbeat, every shared joke in the face of darkness, every tear that turned into fuel. Humanity had not just survived, it had redefined what survival meant. And in doing so, it had given the universe something it never knew it needed. Hope with teeth. The last thing the Empire heard was laughter. The first thing the galaxy heard afterward was the same. And it never stopped. Did this story hit you as hard as it hit us? What would you do in humanity's final hour? Drop your ideas for the next HFY story below.